Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Erica with Memory Box Candle Co. and I make videos all about the journey of starting a candle business. And welcome to the fourth video in my Candle Making for Beginners series, where we are talking all about choosing your wicks. Now, this topic is a little bit more involved, I think, than choosing your jars, choosing your wax. And that's just because wicks are very interesting. There is so much that goes into combining all of your materials together to create a good performing candle. And when we think about a candle, we think about fire and the fact that there is a flame with the candle, and what gets lit on fire? The wick does. So when it comes to choosing your wick and figuring out kind of an understanding wicks, I'm going to start with the very basics and then give you a little bit more information later on. So some real basic information about wicks for you is that there are different series of wicks, and within those series there's different sizes. So you can look at a series of a wick as being kind of like the brand or the type of wick that it is, and then within that there are different sizes. Now, the majority of the time when wicks are labeled as something, they have a number associated with them. So as an example, I have CDN wicks right here. So this one right here is a CDN size 8. This one is a CDN size 7. This one is a size 6. So there's different sizes of wicks, and not all the time it's going to be a kind of 1 through 10 or 1 through whatever. But what I have found is that the higher the number it is, the bigger the wick. The smaller the number it is, the smaller the wick. And if we're looking at the differences in sizes of wicks, I do want to show you an example here. So I also have Eco Wicks in front of me. So this is another type of series of wick. So I have an Eco 14 right here. And then I also have an Eco 1. So 14 is a bigger, thicker wick. So the thicker the wick, the larger the wick is. And the thinner the wick, the smaller the wick is. So I will show you an example here if you're able to see. And the one on the left is the larger Eco 14. The one on the right is the smaller Eco 1. Now, the reason why there's different sizes is because there's different diameters of jars. So here's two examples. These are two different diameters of jars, and they would require different sizes of wicks in them. And what the wick does is it works with the rest of the materials inside of the candle. So it works alongside of the wax and the fragrance oil and the diameter of the jar. And it's able to burn either properly, if it's properly wicked for those materials and for that diameter, or it could be overwicked, which overwick just means that you use too big of a wick, the flame is too high, it's burning way too fast, and you would need to then wick down, which would mean, let's say you're working with an Eco 14 and you need to go down to an Eco 12 or an Eco 10 because the Eco 14 was burning way too hot and way too fast. And then on the flip side, if you're working with a wick that is, let's say, too small for that container, like an Eco 8 or Eco 10, and you're thinking, okay, well, it's tunneling, it's really not, performing well, it's starting to get drowned out, which a drowned out wick basically means that the flame gets really, really, really small. There's still a lot of unmelted wax on the side, and you can tell that it's just going to tunnel down the middle. And we don't want that, because not only is that not going to have a good hot throw, because the melt pool and the flame kind of work together to really throw that fragrance into the air, but we also don't want the candle to tunnel, because then it's just kind of a pointless candle. You can't really use a candle that is tunneling, because it's just going to keep drowning itself out, because it's not powerful enough. The wick isn't big enough to be able to create a large enough melt pool to completely fill the diameter of the container. So if you have a really small wick and it's only going to say, let's say, do about a quarter or $1/4 sized in diameter, let's say, and you have a very large vessel that you're working with, it's a really large diameter, and you put in a small wick in there, I mean, it's only gonna go so far because it only has enough strength, it's only large enough to be able to melt in that small diameter. So at that point, you would have to wick up or choose a larger wick in the series of wicks that you're working with. Another thing to know about wick testing is that I actually prefer to choose wicks where it doesn't completely create a full melt pool in the first burn. So I do all of my burn test in 4-hour burn time. So here is a 9-ounce straight-sided jar. And this one actually, you can see some hang up on the sides. This was just a first burn on this one, but I still felt like it's doing pretty good. I still need to do obviously the whole burn test on this one, but if I lit a wick that was, let's say, way too large for this, and after an hour or two of the first burn, it's already like half an inch deep in a melt pool, and you're able to see that the flame is, you know, pretty big at that point, and it's the first burn, then that's indicating that it's over wicked. And that's because if it's already burning hot enough at the top of the jar, the lower it starts to burn in the jar, it's just going to get hotter and hotter. And that's because it's creating this like encaved effect in the candle. So when the wick is down here, even if you're trimming it every time before each burn to 1/4 of an inch, it's going to still create way too much heat. The wick is going to be way too big and create so much more than is needed for the diameter and for the materials that are inside of the candle. So when I was doing burn test on this jar, I personally like to use the CDN series wicks with the soy 10 wax that I work with, but that does not necessarily mean that that is the only wick that could work with this jar with this wax. When it comes to the testing process, and I'll talk about this more in a future video, but when it comes to the testing process, it's highly recommended that you test out multiple different series of wicks, because there could be a series of wick that actually performs really well in terms of how it's burning. It's not burning too hot, it's burning pretty slow, but it's still able to, you know, melt down the sides cleanly. But the throw is not there. It's not actually throwing all the fragrance into the air, which is obviously a very huge component about making a candle, because that can be a confusing part about choosing the correct wick. It's not always just about choosing the right size of wick, but the different series of wick could actually make a difference. And that's just going back to the whole chemical compound of everything, is that whatever ingredients that you're working with, whatever type of wax, fragrance oil, whatever any of that is made up of, there could be different series of wicks that could perform better and actually throw better and create a better hot throw and a better candle experience for both you and maybe your future customer if you're looking to do this as a business, or friends and family if you're going to be giving it away. You want to create a good candle where the flame is going to do its job, to where it's not going to be too big, throwing off soot and going crazy, but also to the point where it's not going to be either so small or non-effective to where it's not able to bring out the fragrance into the air. And if you're wondering how to go about choosing what wick size you need for your chosen materials, because I know it can be really overwhelming. There's so many different types of series, there's so many different numbers, you're wondering what everything means. So what I would recommend is Candle Science does have a kind of like a wick choosing tool on their website. I can try to link it down in the description box below or a pinned comment of this video. I would say take that with a grain of salt, because because everything is going to require testing and further testing. So what I would do is whatever size they recommend, I would test that size and then 2 sizes smaller and maybe like a size or 2 bigger, because you never know. It's kind of like what I did with these jars right here. So I actually didn't know what size to start off with. I'm pretty familiar with the CDN Wick series sizes because that's what I use in my regular candle line, but I'm not as familiar with working with 1 wick. I usually double wick all of my containers, which is using 2 wicks in 1 container. So what I did was I tested the CDN size 4 all the way up until the CDN size 8, and I actually found that the CDN size 4 worked the best in this container. At first I thought that the CDN size 5 was going to work really well, but I actually liked the way that CDN size 4 worked better. I may need to wick up, which is choosing that next size, so going from a size 4 to a size 5. If I'm using a fragrance oil that has a lot of vanillin in it, and we will be getting into that in the fragrance oil video, but essentially the more vanillin that a fragrance oil has, the heavier it is, and the more power that you need to the wick. So you can think about the bigger the wick, the more power it's going to have to be able to burn through and create a proper melt pool. So I may need to actually wick up on certain sizes or certain fragrance oils that I work with, but so far it's been working pretty good. And then the last thing I'm going to throw at you in this video, because I know there's so much information, is talking about double wicking. So in this container right here, so this is an 8-ounce tin that I get from California Candle Supply. And with this one, this actually has 2 CDN 2s in it. Now, if you were to look up the information on what size wick would go well with this container, I had tested a single wick in this container multiple times. I had tried the largest size wicks in both Eco, I think CD series, CDN series. I think I tried LX wicks at one point. And I was not able to find a single wick that was actually able to have a contained flame that wouldn't have crazy amounts of soot, but would also melt the diameter. So in my opinion, working with this container with my chosen materials, I decided to double wick because I do a blend of wax to be able to control the heat. So with this one, what I would recommend is if you are working with a container that you feel like you need to double wick once you kind of get the hang of candle making, is you always want to start with the smallest wick series. You never want to take a single wick that is, let's say for this container, it was an Eco 12 that is recommended for this container for this diameter. You never want to then double wick it with 2 Eco 12s. You would want to double wick it with 2 Eco 1s, which is, I believe, the smallest wick in that series. The reason behind that is because each of these wicks are going to have their own melt pool diameter. So remember, the bigger the wick, the bigger that melt pool. So if you double wicked what typically you would single wick, it would turn into a campfire, and we don't want that. Again, I know that was a lot of information about wicks, but I really hope that even as a beginner, that this information was really, really helpful for you and that you learned a lot in this video and that you can take this knowledge and be able to implement it into your candle making journey. And I'm so excited for the next video. I believe we're going to be talking about fragrance oils, so very excited for that. So please stay tuned for video number 5. But with that, I'm going to end today's video right here. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave it a big thumbs up, as well as subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, don't forget to follow me over on Instagram at Memory Box Candle Co. And I will see you in my next video.